Welcome to
Woohoo!
Compliance Conversations, hosted by Ilsa and Spot on Insurance. Today we'll be discussing staffing your compliance team from zero knowledge to expert in the field. This is part one of three. Parts 2 and 3 will take place on October 22nd, and the final one will be on November 5th.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is going to be a 1-hour session. We're streaming today on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope. If you want to ask any questions during the webinar, do so on the questions and answers section. If you just want to say hello, just put it on the chat.
Okay, sharing their past challenges or horror stories.
No horror stories.
And best practices to get out of things are Joanne Delgado. She's from the Surplus Lines Association of California. We've got Angela Hatchell, Deputy Commissioner of Agent Services Division at the North Carolina Department of Insurance. Welcome. Is your first time here?
It is.
All right. And Ghazi Najee. Ghazi, Principal at AKO Insurance Consulting. Ben Volkner, Director of Client Services at QuestPro Consultants.
And he is first time here, but he's been on our podcast before.
Yes, sir. He's done a great podcast with us. Sophia Reed, Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Pure Insurance. Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you.
Meeting up with you in all these conferences. And from our ILSA team, we've got Russ Foster, our GM. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot Sarah.
You can't forget Sarah.
Sarah Rippins, AVP and Compliance Manager, also at Pure Insurance. And back to our compliance team at ILSA, there's Russ Foster, who's our GM. Christy Roberts, Licensing and Compliance Manager. Lorenzo Houston in the house, Surplus Lines Tax Filing Manager. And we've got Sabrina Slater, Annuals and Corporate Manager. And we've got Joyce King, Special Projects Administrator and lead dog on this.
Yes. So, oh my goodness, like Ted said, we're going to be talking about staffing your compliance team. And I don't even know how we have not done this webinar before, because it's something that our clients, companies are constantly talking to us about. Like, they know that we know how to get compliance staff up to speed. So I am so excited about this. So Joyce, let's roll, because we only have 1 hour.
It wasn't East Coast specific.
Okay.
I hired somebody in San Francisco, I hired someone in Houston, and then I hired someone in Atlanta. So I actually haven't hired in the East Coast.
One place you didn't hire, okay.
In my new role at Pure, I all of a sudden now have a team thanks to Sophia, and I am bringing on 2 in-house people. So I'm not hiring, and they're both in Georgia. So I don't have any East Coast comments to make. Maybe Joanne's got a little bit more information on that than me. So that was the East Coast question. Can you remind me of the first part of the question?
And really, what we're trying to do here is just kind of like figure out, okay, like, we know that staffing compliance folks can sometimes be tricky, right? Like, we have the perspective here from the insurance departments. As regulators, we're going to be asking you, what is it like? We know big organizations have challenges. Small organizations have challenges. Big organizations a lot of times have challenges because they're in big markets, right? Where there's a lot of competitors, a lot of employers available. And then small agencies might be in small towns, kind of like us. How do you find someone that is, well-versed in licensing and compliance? So it's going to be really interesting to hear everyone's perspective today.
My what I really tried to do when I was looking for people was to find candidates that actually knew what surplus lines insurance was. I felt like that was, for me, sort of the entry into the game, because what we were doing at Marsh and what we're doing in Pure Programs is so specific to the surplus lines industry. Even if you have all admitted experience, it's just different. What making a surplus lines placement, and people who are working only on the admitted side think that surplus lines insurance is this big red XXX and they don't want to get involved. And so to have somebody who can actually explain what surplus lines insurance is, understand what a diligent effort is, understand that there's tax filing and payment deadlines and due dates and special licenses you have to have, that for me was sort of the entry into even being able to get an interview.
Yeah.
Sophia, what kind of challenges are you experiencing there in Atlanta?
So one of the things kind of similar to like the larger markets, there's a lot of different competition. And so really, and Pure Programs is situated in Roswell, which is about 20 miles north of the city. So sometimes it's difficult to get people, when you do find someone who at least has that baseline information of surplus lines, to me, I feel like you can teach them everything else. But when we were looking for a position prior to Sarah joining us, it was difficult, one, to get people to relocate. So just being open, kind of that mobility there. And then on top of that, what I also found, what I would always ask about was kind of just their general attitude towards automation and technology. At Programs, we tried to automate as much as we possibly could, and that was kind of always our goal. And so if someone was kind of averse to technology, averse to using like robotics process automation, averse to, getting slick, or didn't even have really a working concept of that in their previous position, that would be a difficult obstacle to overcome.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was actually going to ask you about during the interview process, and it sounds like we had talked earlier in the week, and you mentioned that very thing about any aversion to the automation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's go to our regulators, Angela and Joanne. And let's start with you, Angela. You've worked at the North Carolina Department of Insurance most of your career, if not, close to it. Let's talk about some of the recruiting challenges that you have faced.
Well, with the department and with any state agency, part of our the challenges we face is salary. The state regulators cannot really, it's not the same compensation package salary-wise as it is with an insurer. We do have some unique things in that some of our retirement benefits are good, and our stability is good, things like that. We do at the department have a pretty good record of bringing people in with minimal or low experience, and then being able to, through cross-training and education, they're able to move up through the ranks somewhat that way. So that's kind of our bang for the buck, I guess, more so than the compensation package. COVID has also kind of stretched us a little bit. We were not a very pro telework environment, but because of COVID, that has kind of changed. And with that, we've seen the benefits and some of the things that are adverse as well. So I would say that, we're always looking for people with insurance experience, but it is very difficult on the regulator side to bring in people with a lot of experience based on the salaries.
So, Joyce, do you mind if I add something here? Because I
Absolutely.
think we're hitting on a couple of good points here, because I think especially entry level or those that don't have the experience, making sure that when we recruit or we look for these individuals, they might have skill sets that might be conducive to the work, right? So surplus lines, compliance, looking for those that might have certain level of analytical skills, being able to digest that information. So kind of going beyond kind of the typical, this is what we're looking for. They have to have the surplus lines background. And sometimes, let's be honest, I bring the diversity spin to this. When you talk about Black and brown professionals in this industry, I mean, the industry is already kind of lacking in that area, but when you niche it to surplus lines and compliance, it's even smaller in those demographics. And so really looking outside the box as to skill sets that are conducive to the role versus they have to have a specific degree or license or experience here and there. And I think that's kind of where our job market or our employers are kind of opening up to, expanding their preview around what makes a good employee, what makes a good hire.
Yeah,
That's a good point. No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I have a follow-up to that because when we finally did hire an analyst at Programs, he had absolutely no insurance experience, let alone surplus lines experience, but he had worked in luxury retail in an operations capacity for several years. And so what I took from him was that he was just intellectually curious. And so that's one of the factors, in addition to grit and emotional intelligence, we look for intellectual curiosity, because in surplus lines, Arlene and I have a pretty similar story where when we started, there was no reference point, there was no manual, there was nothing. We kind of had to figure it out. And so having someone that kind of just innately questions, well, why does this work this way? Or why doesn't that happen? And then wants to go seek out the information to figure out the why. To me, like to Ngozie's point, you can't, that's a skill set that you really can't train for. Like, you just have to have that. And that was important. And he's been successful in this role because of that kind of intellectual curiosity.
I can tell you that Spot On Insurance and ILSA are kind of poster childs for this, because everybody that we hire and we train from the very beginning. So we look for people who are very interested in learning, who are very interested in going to another level, who have that curiosity that Ngozi talked about. And if they bring that to the table, then what our job is, if they're that little seed, our job is to nurture that seed and see how much we can get them to grow. And it really has been amazing. I mean, in 6 months to a year, they really know the insurance and regulatory compliance. We put them through training courses, and Russ can speak more on this.
Right, and we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If you don't mind, because I want to stick with what we're doing right now. I'm sorry, Ted, you're the boss.
Hey, you guys got us going in a rabbit hole.
Hey, that's me. That's my fault. Sorry, Ted. I got you in trouble.
No,
in trouble.
Good conversation.
Ted stays in trouble. But yeah, we are definitely going to talk about some training in a little bit, but this is the perfect time. I do have a question on here for Safia, and I was going to ask it a little bit later, but what an opportune time to ask it, because what I was going to say, so at the end of the day, how do you know they'll be a good fit? And the reason I want to ask you that, we talked earlier in the week, and you told me how important it is to not look for a person who fits in this already pre-prepared hole, right? Talk about that. I loved your take on this.
So Pure overall has a really great hiring process, in the sense that we create a panel. So and part of that is to eliminate unconscious bias. And so we have a panel of the hiring manager, usually the hiring manager's direct manager, also have a colleague, someone that they would be working with on that team. And then what we have are called cultural ad interviewers. And these are people that are just throughout all different levels of the company that have been trained to look at those things like emotional intelligence, grit, intellectual curiosity, and to really assess a person on those three characteristics, so that And so we're even down pretty intentional to how we choose it. We don't call it a cultural fit because we're not asking someone to take off pieces of themselves to fit into this mold. We call it a cultural add. And so we're looking for someone who's going to come in here and drive the culture even further forward. And so, having that panel, having the cultural add part, having all 4 of those people along with the HR representative, actually having a kind of a conversation. Well, what did you take from that? And being able to kind of give insight, that's all been able to lead to making really sound decisions at the end of the day when you're taking in that much feedback.
Very good. So I want to bring our other regulator in, Joanne. Joanne, you spent many, many years in the private sector at AIG and one of its subsidiaries, and now you are a new regulator in California. Talk to us about perhaps the differences in recruiting challenges, if there are any, and just overall your recruiting challenges that you've faced over the years in expanding teams.
So I'm going to say that it's interesting because the challenges where there may be some differences, the differences for me have been minor. When I look for teams or I'm trying to build a team, I very often look outside the industry. So I happen to look away from, not that having insurance knowledge is not a plus, but I look more for creativity, the ability to think out of the box, the ability to bring something different. And so we're in the process, right? So we're actually recruiting right now. And the challenge has been where I'm looking for a compliance person. I want a compliance person that is going to bring a different aspect to the industry, right? So I look at surplus lines, it's growing, the types of products, the types of risks that we're starting to look at, different environmental factors, right? We take COVID and what is that adding to the industry? And it's really trying to find people that can bring different pieces to the table. I would say from the challenge process, and maybe this, although I would say even in a larger organization, the biggest challenge is really having an effective process. And it takes time to build that process. It takes time to structure how you're going to write your job descriptions, having the right job descriptions, getting those job descriptions into the right places to attract the right talent. And then as you find talent, I'm going to say we tend to, or I feel like we've leaned toward using some of the automation to say, oh, this is a good candidate or a bad candidate. Quite frankly, I filter through every single resume that comes through because I feel like in some cases the automation is throwing away potential candidates that bring something else that, maybe you don't say it the best. And some people's strong suit is not necessarily building a resume, but it can be building your organization. So I think that from the challenge perspective, it's really hard to get that program in place that really works for your company, making sure you have the right people. So Sophia touched on having the right people interview a candidate. Some of the new things that I always try to bring, at least in my role, is making sure we have a broad perspective, right? So it's not just going to be the reporting manager or the senior leadership team. It's really looking across the company and the different areas that job touches. So this is an area, because we're recruiting, I could talk about for 3 days. So I'll end it there and let you keep going.
So I do have something to add to that. It's also perspective. And I'll take you back a few years. In my department, I'm the manager, and then I have 2 supervisors. So when I say one of my supervisors, I don't mean someone above me, but it's below me. But I only say that to give you context. We were hiring in my department and I'm in the licensing and compliance department, and one of my supervisors, she was reviewing applications. And while Arlene, way back many moons ago, back in 1905, she set this grading criteria up for us. And, you know, if you didn't pass
More
the
than
grade,
2 typos out.
if you didn't necessarily pass the grade, we didn't see those applications. So when my supervisor took over that role of looking at applications for us, she would kind of flip that whole process on end. So in looking at a 5-year history, if the person she was looking at may not have had a consistent 5-year history, she was looking at it like, well, maybe they didn't find their niche. You know, maybe what job they were doing didn't satisfy their curiosity or didn't bring anything that challenged them to, you know, what they were looking for. And I was like, wow, I never thought of that. You know, I've been fortunate. I've been in the same job, you know, my career. I've only had 2 jobs in my life. I was a soldier, and now I'm a manager, licensing and compliance. Well, I was in prison for a little while, but that's a different story.
I was with you in prison, so I was going to say, I know you had another job.
We were on the work release program. We were in prison during the day, and we went home at night.
Guys, please no.
I'm so sorry. I digress. But it was a different perspective, right? She brought a different perspective. So now when I review applications, I don't necessarily ding them for not having a consistent 5-year employment history. They may not have just found something that was suitable for them or challenging enough for them. So, you know, it's just about perspective, looking at things different from what you've always looked at, you know, looking at a potential new hire different ways than what you were used to looking at before.
And I would add one other thing. We also look at different, maybe you were in banking and you're coming to insurance. It's the same skill set, but just a different application. So you can't say because they don't have insurance, their skill set is not maybe well matched, but they are. We also have an interview panel, and we get individuals from within our division, but we also always make sure we have someone outside our division, perhaps in another division, that can bring that's going to look for something totally different. So I think it, as everybody said, it makes such a difference to not just pigeonhole people and what you're looking for, but to be a little more open-minded.
So I just want to say one more thing in defense of my having surplus lines experience, because the people that I was hiring for in my compliance role were ones that really had to influence the brokers to be able to follow the rules. So there had to be some baseline of knowledge, but also that higher level of being able to influence and explain and have conversations with more senior people in a company. So, so I agree. It's a different kind of a role when you're looking for somebody to do analysis or, you know, tax filings and payments, that intellectual curiosity. I mean, that it was also what I was looking for, but I really needed someone who was sort of functioning in more of a compliance officer kind of a role to take that kind of a role. So, in my defense.
But I think you need, Sarah, to that point, I think you need both, though. I think, you know, that's where I think the beauty of creating a team and creating an environment that is diverse, where you have some that come in with experience, some that have no experience, some that think differently. I mean, so I think, you know, there's an opportunity to have everyone at the table, right? Because that's what makes, because even, you know, I sit in the role of a customer service person, right? I engage with clients. And sometimes your clients are internal versus external. You need different people to engage with different and diverse customer base. Let's say, you know, put it in that terms. So I support. I mean, I think you need both. So I think no harm, no foul. I think we just talk about kind of diversity across the board, or as to your talent and what that looks like.
One thing you guys have a leg up on us, though, coming at it in a bigger city or you know, a bigger market, you can target your some, like Sarah said, she was targeting for people with experience in her area that she needed. In this small town here at ILSA, the only thing they know about insurance is they need car insurance, home insurance, and health insurance. They don't realize the scope or the depth of what goes on for an insurance agent to be able to even sell an insurance policy in Texas, let alone in all 50 states. So when they come here and we tell them what we do, it's so foreign to them. They don't put, there's no way to put two and two together. And, you know, I mentioned working in a prison. The only thing I could even translate the two were bonds. I knew you needed a surety bond to get out of jail. And I knew that an insurance producer needed a bond to, you know, get a license. So, we don't have people that come to us with a lot of experience whatsoever, other than maybe technical skills like being able to work on a computer. Now, when we do find people that have insurance skills, maybe they were an insurance agent, we tend to slot them into our sales team because they can talk that talk with the actual insurance agents who need our help. It's not so foreign to them to have a conversation and sell our services to these producers or, you know, principals on the other line. They already kind of build a rapport and know what each other is going through and the pains of, you know, trying to license an agency on all 50 states and keep up with all the different compliances. So it's kind of difficult to find someone with any kind of experience here in a small town, but we still hire people in and we train them from the floor up. And we do find that you don't have to know anything about insurance to be able to do our work that we need done.
So I have a question to the group, though. And just generally speaking, because you raise a good point, Christy. I mean, small town versus metropolitan area. But now COVID has taught us a lot about, you know, being able to work virtually. So does that become less of an issue, right? And your opportunities around hiring, again, that diverse talent increases because now we're functioning, right? High functioning in a very virtual platform.
We are. I've been fortunate. I haven't had to hire anybody that was not familiar with ILSA. I brought someone back that had been an ILSA employee before, but Sabrina can definitely speak on that. She has had to hire during the COVIDs, two employees that are brand new to the industry, and we're trying to bring them on and train them. So I'll turn that over to Sabrina.
Technically, it hasn't changed. Really, the only change in my process has been instead of doing the typical panel interview that we normally do, I actually had to hold a interview over the phone. So that was definitely different. I do like sitting face to face and interacting with people and you know, playing off of each other. And really just getting to know that employee. We still got to do that, but it was definitely different. Just because I couldn't see her facial expressions and things like that. The other employee that I did actually came on site. I've been very lucky. Neither one of those two were adverse to coming into the office. So again, a lot of the training and interview process has been right here on site. Of course, you know, practicing social distancing and separating cubicles and, you know, things like that. So there's definitely been a little different process in that scheme, but for the most part, nothing. It's same old.
Yeah. Hey, guys, and I hate to cut in because this is a great conversation, but I've got to move us on because we got a lot more agenda to get through. And my next question is for Ben. We talked earlier in the week, and I think you were going to talk to us a little bit about 3 challenges that you notice as a recruiter concerning insurance compliance staffing. So very specific.
Specific indeed. Well, I think everybody's kind of touched on the foundation of all these problems, and it starts with making a realistic diagnosis about what the talent pool is, what the skills are, the must-haves to do the position correctly. Unfortunately, there are still kind of deal-breaker skills that in compliance that are a 6-month to 1-year learning curve minimum, particularly in niche areas. And so I think getting a realistic diagnosis of what the talent pool is, how many home offices are nearby, how many regional offices are nearby that may have those sort of employees. AICPA is also one of the greatest networking organizations in all of insurance. And oftentimes, just creating and executing a plan that involves some realistic view of who the competitors are, where the relocation candidates are. There are niches and anomalies everywhere. It's easy to assume that, big city this, small city that, but, the poaching that goes on between Hartford and travelers in Hartford is very different than, why people won't relocate from Philly to Pittsburgh. It's just, there's nuance across all these geographies and markets, and then within all the subsets of insurance, admitted and non-admitted especially, that take a long time to learn. And I think for those reasons, it becomes difficult to achieve building a process that excludes bias like Sophia's done, which I think you see a lot of top-end organizations leading the way doing, and involving other peer managers from outside departments and not letting things get siloed. I think anything you can do to achieve uniformity and remove bias from your talent and recruiting operation is a major win.
Absolutely.
Very good. So you guys know or some of you might not know, but we in Texas are in a very small town. It's like population 5,000. And to go with what Christy has spoken about, we had recruiting challenges, right? First of all, we knew that anyone walking in through the door was going to have zero licensing and compliance experience. And then second, the other thing is, in small towns, when you're a newcomer, they don't know you, so they make up stories about you. So if you're out there, you're an agency, you're starting out, that's the other hurdle that you're going to have to face. Nobody knows you. Nobody knows who you are. They don't know your reputation. You're not stable. So we had to do a lot of innovative things to get people to apply for jobs. Ted and I went to the high schools and we spoke in the auditorium about what we do. And then what our take on that, what we did, which was really innovative, is we got high school juniors and seniors to join us as interns. So they would come in after they would get out of school and they would start working, not necessarily meaning that when they graduated from high school, they would join us. Some of them went on to college and years later came back, or some of them joined us right after they graduated. But we already could tell whether they were going to be a good fit, and they were starting to learn their terminology. By the time they would come on full time, they were good.
Wait a minute. Did we get Lorenzo almost out of high school, Lorenzo? Speak up, son.
I was 19. You sure did?
19. And let me tell you, he's over 30 right now.
So why you got to tell people 30?
Hey, Lorenzo came, his wife came, Sabrina's sister worked here, and then Sabrina came. So and Sabrina and Lorenzo are brother and sister-in-law. So we have a big old circle of family members throughout this whole ILSA experience.
You gotta be careful who you criticize around here because they're related to somebody else.
Yeah.
I just want it to be known that I am the only one that has stayed the entire 12 and a half years. I haven't left. I'm just...
That seems to be a little shade at you, Lorenzo.
Yeah, we've had a few boomerang employees, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, one of the things that Arlene was saying earlier about the hardships that we had, one of the things that we were told there when we got to the town and was starting the business, where they said, most places have a gene pool, most cities. You have a gene pond here, so you really are going to have to search. But then we also had down the street, which is about 35, 40 miles away, Baylor. Mm-hmm. And so we also started to try to tap into that as well, people who live nearby.
But the other thing, I feel that we didn't have that baggage of like, oh, are we going to get someone with experience? No, we knew that we weren't going to have that. So we knew that we had to create all of our internal training. And of course, it's evolved over the years. Now, when I see our training processes, I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are awesome. But we knew that we had to train from zero knowledge. And obviously, we've done a good job because we've been able to have a stable business for over 20-something years, serving some of the world's largest insurance agencies. And our people know their stuff.
And we have a very diverse group of individuals here. Some are from big cities, some are right here from Groesbeck. They don't venture very far out. And, you know, we have military, we have, you know, ex-cons, me and Joyce. So we have a very diverse group of individuals that are working here. Some have worked here, like Arlene was mentioning, in high school, and they left and they come back. So we do see a little bit of boomerang employees. They love the culture that we strive to have at ILSA, and that's family. We really want that family orientation, and that's all Ted and Arlene. You know, they came from New York and they didn't want that business atmosphere in their company. And you know, we wear, you know, normal clothes to work and tennis shoes, flip-flops, and we come in and
Not
when
normal.
It's not normal clothes for work. We wear abnormal clothes for work.
they painted the walls soothing colors. They put effort into driving a culture here at ILSA of family and you know, putting employees first.
So Sabrina, talk to us about, once we get candidates, how and talk to us about how we find if they're a good fit.
Well, first, so like if they're already on board with us, or like during the interview process.
Like the interview, yeah.
Yeah, the interview process, like what we put them through. And then Russ, I want you to talk to us a little bit about, you know, once we hire them and that onboarding process.
Okay, so we also utilize a panel interview process as well. Especially, it never seems to fail when we have one spot opens up, there seems to be another one that opens up and becomes available. So we actually have several different departments on that interview. So it's almost kind of like an inquisition. I really do feel sorry for them.
Yes.
We set up like 5 or 6 you know, senior staff members, typically managers and supervisors, you know, with that one interview, and you know, it's kind of sink or swim, and a lot of them do really well. It's just a matter of you know, can you talk? Can you communicate effectively with us? That type of thing. I really enjoy getting to know the person. I do find a lot of situations, it's not so much, I mean, I want to know, you know, what software experience have you had? Do you know, can you turn on a computer? You know, technical things like that. Again, a lot of that is stuff that we can train them on. I really want to know, can you problem solve? Can you think on your feet? Can you communicate? If you have, you know, a principal of an insurance agency or a regulator, it took me years to get comfortable talking to regulators. Now I do it all in webinars all day long. So, I mean, that's not something that, you know, comes with ease. It's not even easy for me now. But really, just holding those conversations with people, getting to know them. Some of the things that I look for on their applications are if they've had customer service experience. And of course, you know, since we're in this small rural area, you know, a lot of times they don't. A lot of my applicants are straight out of school, and they're like, I don't really have customer service experience. You know, the only job I've had is waitressing. I'm like, I will tell you, I'm a firm believer that waitressing is the #1 customer service oriented job. You can not make money if you don't have customer service or care about your customers or care about what you're placing in front of your clients or your customers. So, you know, just things like that. That's one of the things I look for. Longevity, you know, are you bouncing around from place to place? And if you are, then why are you doing that? I want to understand, you know, if you took 2 years off, why did you take 2 years off? Oh, well, I was going full-time school, or I had to stay home and take care of my kids. Okay, well, what were you doing when you were doing that? Were you volunteering, at the local fire station, or, Stars of Hope organization? Or, what were you doing in that downtime? Were you sitting on your backside, or were you actively doing things to better yourself, better your community, things like that? That's the kind of things that I'm looking for. One of the biggest misconceptions that we have when we're talking to these applicants is they think that, like Christy was saying earlier, is that, you guys sell insurance, right? We're like, no, we are not an insurance agency. We're not an insurance company. We strictly provide compliance services to those insurance agencies, and of course, in some cases, companies. So we definitely have to explain that and let them know. Part of that interview also, we give them the ILSA background and the history of, where Ted and Arlene came from. They're not from Texas, they're from New York, and they had to get out of New York as quickly as possible and get to Texas. And one of the many things I love about them. But just things like that, just really, really getting to know the people, having those conversations. One of the questions that I love to ask them is, what's one of your pet peeves? Does the next, somebody chomping chips next to you, does that bother you? Okay. All right. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's really just common. Yeah, I did. It's just common questions, really just getting to know the people, how they're going to interact with your team. I know some of the things that Christy looks for in an applicant may not necessarily be in line with what I'm looking for. Same way with Lorenzo. That's why I think those panel interviews are so valuable. Somebody who likes doing the same thing over and over, that repetitious work, that screams Christy's department. On mine, I'm doing 5 or 6 different things. Lorenzo's looking at, high risk, high penalties, things that are going to cost a lot of money if you jack it up. So that's a very stressful situation. If you can't handle stress, then that department's probably not a good fit for you. So there's definitely a lot of different things that we're looking at during that interview panel process.
Russ, if you could just, I know we wanted you to talk about our training program. If you'll do that as briefly as possible, but give us all the high level detail, but we are running so short on time and we've got so much left to go.
I will make it as quick as I can. I do want to go back to a couple of things. First of all, within 3 square miles of where I'm sitting, there are about 8,000 people. So that's our pool. And some of those people already have jobs, so they're not interested in coming to work for us. In onboarding, just to tag onto Christy and Sabrina, because we know we don't have experienced people by and large, we look for traits. Customer service skills or experience is great if they have it. If not, we can definitely work with them. But we really try to see, do you have those traits that we're looking for, since you don't necessarily have skills yet? We tried the traditional way of, they interviewed great, we bring them on, and we would find that within 90 days, either they had voted themselves off the island because they came in thinking that ILSA was one thing, and they found out, oh my gosh, I'm going to go work for McDonald's. You guys can have this. And then, of course, the other flip of the coin was we would vote them off the island because they interviewed very well, and that's about their biggest skill. So we would have to let them go. So we've refined our training process, as Arlene said, over the years. And what we have now is really kind of a basic training. We have nearly 2 weeks of very intensive, very high-paced training where we actually teach them fundamentals of insurance. We teach them terminology. We teach them, about the surplus lines market, about property and casualty. We teach them about compliance. We teach them about the regulator. We teach them about you guys, Sarah and Angela. We teach them that, hey, these are the people that we have to deal with, and what your jobs are, and how important it is that you guys do what you do to protect the consumers, and things that they just didn't know about the insurance industry. And so they come out of that couple of weeks already knowing a lot more than I learned in the first 6 months that I was at ILSA. And so that helps enormously. The other thing that we do is we send them through a series of exercises that are designed to, start teaching them what we need them to do in databases, in answering phones, and dealing with writing emails to our clients. But we also simulate some of the stresses that they're going to be dealing with, so that at the end of that time, they know what some people didn't find out for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or a couple of months, that whoa, I don't think I want to do this. They'll know that before they graduate from our training course. And then, of course, those people who come through and just blow us away, so far, they have done very well here. They were better prepared when they got to their departments. Their departments were much happier with them because the amount of things that they now had to teach them were specific to their department and not the general knowledge that they needed to work anywhere else. So that's what we've been doing for a little over a year now. And I've been very happy with it. It's been interesting to try to do it during COVID. We had to kind of abbreviate some things and keep people separated, but we elected not to just abandon it because of conditions, because we still want these people to be here in a year or 2 years or 3 years. So you spend that much time and effort, and you get somebody now that has experience. You don't want them walking out the door. So between what Christy was saying, the culture that Ted and Arlene created here originally, we worked very hard to maintain that, to keep people wanting to stay here. And, we talked about the boomerang employees. We have many, many people that leave to go do other things. And they get out, we call it getting out into the real world. They go out in the real world and they go, this is not ILSA, and they want to come back.
They don't want any part of the real world.
That's exactly right. So we're pretty proud of how that works. And that, in a very short amount of time, is our training program.
Lorenzo. Moving on. Sorry. Lorenzo, we talked earlier in the week, and I wanted to ask you, this is not a question for you as it relates here to ILSA, because compliance is our forte, but in dealing in other areas, what are some limiting factors that you may have to deal with as you're trying to build a compliance team? Something that maybe we haven't talked about yet.
That's a good question. I actually want to preface this by saying that insurance companies are businesses. Okay, surprise, surprise. I know. But as a business, generally your number one priority is to create revenue and profit. So sometimes there come situations where there's a disconnect between compliance leaders and senior management, because compliance teams aren't necessarily revenue generating departments. So when it comes to getting the correct personnel or the correct budget for your department, a lot of times you run into the situation where you really kind of have to establish or change the perspective of what compliance means to that actual company. So although you're not a revenue generating department, you are an expense saving department. So you assist the company as a whole by preventing fines, by keeping everything in compliance, keeping the state regulators from beating down your doors and being in the office every so often, doing audits because this is being done wrong or this isn't being done. So a lot of times the disconnect is really just establishing a culture of how important compliance is to upper level management, who, from their perspective, they're, a lot of times they're solely focused on profits.
Very good. So actually, one of the things that I want to touch upon and talk about today is, we have a podcast, and recently with all of the social unrest that has been going on and some of the issues that we've been facing on top of COVID, we started a series called Insurance Conversations in Black and White. And one of the things that we want to ensure is that we move forward as not just as a nation, but as an industry, right? We're in our insurance niche, right? And we started that podcast series because of that. So, Ngozi, let's go to you. Talk to us about finding diverse talent in the insurance industry. I know that you started this new endeavor after many, many years, over 2 decades in the insurance industry. How serious are companies in our industries about ensuring that the complexion changes?
Good, bad, or indifferent, they're really interested at this point, right? I mean, we recognize that the need for diversity has been very apparent in our industry for more than the 20 years that I've been in the industry. But obviously, in light of the Black Lives Matter movement and the unfortunate death of George Floyd and others, that there's a heightened awareness around that need. And we know that there's a business case, right? We understand, there's been many reports, research done about the increased profitability and effectiveness of teams that are diverse. But the question becomes, and excuse me for mentioning this, but the CEO of Wells Fargo made it very apparent that we still have individuals in leadership and individuals in certain spaces and places that still scratch their head around where is that diverse talent when that diverse talent is out there for access, right? And so a lot of work that we're doing with not only my firm, ACO Insurance Consulting, but a number of different other organizations like HBCU Impact, is really bringing that diverse talent to employers and having them recognize that the talent is there and not having to qualify them as qualified talent, right? Because the assumption is that once you go diverse, right, that you potentially lose competency, right? They're not qualified and you're making concessions because of their race, their color, their background. Positive discrimination is a word that I don't like to use at all. It's not a thing that we as diverse professionals want you to hire us for. We don't want to be hired because we're just diverse. We want to be competent first, and we are competent and putting it in those spaces. So, there's a lot of effort in bringing that diverse talent forward. But again, I think to some of the things that were mentioned earlier, not only do you have to bring them forward and attract them and recruit them into our industry, you have to retain them. And I think the one thing about entry level or those that know nothing about the insurance industry, historically we've done a bad job of advocating for our industry. I believe 25 years in, I have 2 degrees in it. Insurance is sexy. And I don't care what shape, form, fashion, or whatever, wherever you come from, that is my story, that is my passion, and that's what I'm sticking to it. And so I think we need to do a better job of attracting that talent and showing them that it is sexy, but then also looking for those individuals who have diverse backgrounds and saying that although you don't have a degree in insurance, although you don't have X, Y, and Z, come on in. We'll welcome you. We can train you much like you do at ILSA. We can groom you and you can become an insurance professional. So, I think we need to take this opportunity as an industry to do better around attracting diverse talent and grooming them so that we can have leadership that's diverse in the future, right? We have to groom our own talent to bring forth that leadership. And again, we need to do a better job of doing that, so.
Very good. Awesome. So one of the things, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation, we, myself and Ted and our team, we've kind of also just shied away from having those conversations before. Like we've had a business for 20 something years, and sometimes our marketing folks would say, we can certify ourselves as minority owned business. We could do this, we can, and we never have, right? And so we were kind of on the other side of the spectrum. We kind of were like, our work is so darn good that people will hear about it. And so that's where we've been. And, so we're really excited. I'm excited that Ted pushed us to do this podcast series, Conversations in Black and White. For me, I felt like, man, we've trained so many people throughout the year. We've tried to get diversity and in our company, and now we're in a position where we continue to just spread our knowledge. Now we just released our online courses. And I think back to the things that we have faced as a business. One of the things that us as a team has faced was, 10 years ago, the recession, the Great Recession. We had a lot of clients all over the country that came to us and said, hey, we can't continue without, we're going out of business. We're merging with another company. We can't, we have to bring this job in-house that we are paying you guys for so many years because we can no longer afford it. So back then we kept thinking about, well, how do we help? How do we give another tool to companies to help them out through these things? But of course we were busy. We were busy revamping ourselves, cross-training our people, which is something that we really did during
head down and on the treadmill
during the Great Recession. But now we fast forward to today, we're in the middle of this pandemic. And we've been spending time putting together online courses. And we said, now that we're in this COVID situation, we're going to launch our courses finally after so many years in development. So I would like you guys to see what we've been working on for a long, long time. This is our licensing and compliance course. And it's something that, we talked about. There's a lot of small agencies that don't have the resources that big companies like a Pure or whatever has, where they can, get all of this knowledge. Or there are big companies that say, you know what, every time my compliance coordinator leaves, I'm back to square one. How do I consistently train my staff? And I'm super excited. We've been working on this for many, many years. And we're finally having it out there. It's a tool for small companies, for mid-sized companies, for big companies that consistently want to train their staff. One of the things that hit me during the beginning of COVID was like 2 weeks into COVID, 2 weeks into the lockdown. In the past, I've heard from the agency side, hey, I need help training my staff. But I got a message on LinkedIn from a girl that lost her job 2 weeks after COVID, after the lockdown. And I was like, darn, that's so fast that people are out of work. And she just needed more help, more guidance, more training. So especially for those folks that are limited, that they are only doing licensing compliance in limited areas, a couple of states, because they're in a small agency. I guess my thing to you guys now is broaden your knowledge in whatever way that you can. If it's through reading, through podcasts, through courses, broaden your knowledge, really invest in yourself. So thank you. I mean, this course, you're able to sign on and get on the waiting list, but we're really excited about it.
And it is part of the reason why we developed Spot on Insurance. It's our form of giving back. Right now we're interviewing some of the most innovative people in the insurance industry, or even in other industries that can help folks in the insurance industry in their roles, such as improving your LinkedIn network. What are the newest innovations with artificial intelligence? We do a lot of that. You definitely should check it out. Spot on Insurance is on iTunes, Spotify, and all the different platforms. But this really is, we hope that each and every one of those episodes has tremendous knowledge for people in the industry to help them. The good thing about the industry as well is that it's so vast. And like we said, you can work in one part of the industry, but not understand what's going on in another part. Well, one of the things that we did with Spot on Insurance was not pigeonhole ourselves into one area, but actually go with curiosity. Look at these different areas of insurance and what people do there, and interview those people. Because, Ngazi, other people out there who say, well, I'm looking for, something else. I'm in insurance, but I'm not happy with this area. Can then you look at all the different areas that they might be a really good fit in. And that's a talent already. That's a person that's already been developed in insurance, but all of a sudden finds this place where that's going to make them super happy for the rest of their lives. And we know that insurance is like fly papers. It grabs you and it doesn't let go. And that's one of the reasons, because if you find all those other opportunities for you to grow and make money, it's there.
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway from this session, and I'm going to give you guys a snippet into what we're going to be covering in the next sessions, is that, we have all come together and we found the challenges to recruit people, whether it's in a small market, whether it's in a big market. What are the criteria that we're using to bring people in for compliance? I mean, for our little world, we're solving some big, major headaches, Like one time, Ted and I got a call. This is like almost, well, you guys will be able to tell from when I say his name. We got a call one afternoon saying, we need that license ASAP. That is for the Vice President of the United States, for Dick Cheney. So we're going back a ways. But I thought when I got that call that they were joking. So, we're doing like big things. And it wasn't a joke. This is when Dick Cheney and George Bush were in office. But, so like we're doing major things. but we are able to train people with zero knowledge and get them to expert level. To see our business, to see where you guys are in the Atlanta market, move from New York to California, it's possible. And I'm excited about the next sessions, which we're going to be diving deep into how do you train people for heavy volume. Maybe you have heavy volume. I know Angela's going to talk about when they have open enrollment, what are some of the things that they do at the department to pull people from other departments. People have a lot of acquisitions going on. Well, that's all hands on deck. So we're going to be talking about how do we get people to be able to fit in during those temporary situations. So that's going to be really exciting next time.
I know it's 3:00 and technically we're out of time, but can we round this out with the one question that came on the Q&A, and I told them I would try to put this out to the panel.
Yes.
And that is, Estelle says, what is the most difficult aspect of compliance for a newbie to learn? And I've already written a little bit on that, and I was like, hey, if you can get over the terminology, that's half the battle, really, right? But just opening that up to the panel, what do you guys think? What is the hardest, the most difficult aspect of compliance for a new person?
I'm going to take that, and I think that it is the terminology, because it's like Greek, the first 2 weeks when you're in training and people are throwing around, the AOI and the SOS and this and that.
And IPR.
And IPR and whatnot.
BDB.
After you're doing that for whatever, like Christine, since 1905, you tend to forget what it was like when you walked in. And sometimes I have to check our people and I have to say, do you remember when you walked in through the doors and it sounded like we were talking a different language? So that can be a bit overwhelming, but it's possible to get through that. By the way, in our compliance courses, we have all of the acronyms, all of the terminology in there because that's like big stuff.
Yeah. For us, it's the different services, the compliance areas. There's so many that an agency has to keep track of, affiliations, appointments, things like that, that often go, they often go like without being noticed, and that can get you into some serious trouble. Address changes, it's the things like that. They don't realize that they even have to do those services. So, those compliance requirements.
And actually, we're going to be getting into that in one of the next sessions that we do in part 2, I believe, or part 3, where we talk about how sometimes you get a skill, like let's say you do renewals really well. Now, all of a sudden, you hear about filings with the Secretary of State, and you just don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. How we have overcome that, how we have been able to push people out of their comfort zones to get into other areas. So that's really important. There's so many different parts to it, right? The departments of insurance, I was about to say DOI, SOS, DOR, but the Secretary of State, the Department of Revenue, there's so much to it.
Yes, there is.
How everything fits together.
Sophia, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a newbie coming into it, I only had brief experience on kind of the life insurance side, and it wasn't more than a couple weeks. So this was all fresh information for me. And I think the biggest fear, kind of like what would have me wake up in the middle of the night, was, my gosh, like, what did I miss? And so there's kind of the uncertainty of it. You just don't know what you don't know. And so that's probably been the most challenging.
You don't know what you don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've said that over the years. We don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, but how many times have, from a vendor, service provider, have our services changed to accommodate things like that?
Yes.
You're doing the same thing for so many years, and then, come to find out, oh, hey, there's this other smaller piece to it that we never knew. Now we've definitely been able to benefit from that, but there's so many little nuances that you just don't know what you don't know until you do, and then you fix it and you run with it.
Yeah.
Y'all want to hear something funny? Apparently, I talk really loud in here in my office and my door's open. So when I asked the question to the panel, what's the hardest thing for a newbie? One of our folks out there in the room, Robin, sent me an instant message and said, I think it's appointments.
Wow, that's funny.
That's my team.
Just to remind you guys, part 2 and part 3 to staffing your compliance team will take place on October 22nd and November 5th. And our next webinar will be next Thursday, and that's going to be part 2 of our mergers and acquisitions in the insurance industry. We're going to be talking about the challenges and best practices, and we're going to be getting into the deal challenges, the negotiation failures, and the transaction solutions. Also, guys, if you know of someone that couldn't attend today, but that could benefit from this webinar, just point them to the ILSA YouTube channel or the Spot On Insurance YouTube channel. So just share it, because you guys know compliance specialists out there. Share the stuff. Don't hoard it all. Thank you guys for being here, and we hope to see you next Thursday.
Thank you,
Bye, everybody.
panelists. Thank y'all.